Perfect. All right. So what we thought we're going to present is not so much about onboarding, but about setting up your development environment and your team to provide independent independent development for Folio modules. So that's what this presentation is going to be about. And we will essentially just walk through why we'd like to do it. That might be interesting for some people, and also like the specific approach that we took to do it. It's nothing extremely complicated. I think probably some people do some form of this, but we'll see. Maybe that gives some people inspiration. All right. Okay. All right. So let's maybe state the problem here. So we would like independent development team to contribute to Folio. In Folio, we have just so the quick sort of summary of the landscape. We have many development teams that are so-called core development teams. Those teams would usually be responsible for maintaining and releasing individual modules in Folio. And so they would be owners of those individual modules, basically, and they will decide on things like, well, in accordance with Folio rules, on how the pull requests are committed. They will review those pull requests across their team members and so forth. So that's usually how Folio is set up. So in a way, there's very strict ownership of individual components in Folio. So when you set up a development team that needs to work on additional module, in addition to their own module on those core modules, you probably want to do this in some level of isolation, but at the same time, you want to ensure that those changes that you're introducing are being upstreamed from your development work, because effectively you want those changes to be part of Folio and be released with, in the upcoming Folio release. So you're setting it up basically to isolate, but you need to have a way to synchronize those changes. You also want to make sure that whatever you do works, and has high quality, because Folio is shared by many developers, many users, and you just want to make sure that your code is not breaking anything else. So that's paramount. So you need to have some testing regime as part of that. You need to be able to sync the work with the upstream, as I mentioned, and we'll show you in a second how we're doing it. And you want to benefit from feedback from the Folio development team. So you want to make sure that you're doing this in a way that is accepted in Folio, so that the development teams can, provide you that feedback as part of pull requests or, part of Jira issues and so forth. So what's the solution that we use? So I'll probably go through this in more detail in the next slide, but roughly we tried many different approaches. We've been setting up branches on the Folio within the Folio core modules, or essentially working as extension of the core team. But what we have found works best for us is actually to introduce an additional level of a separate level outside of the Folio parameter, so that we can change the code there, we can test it separately, and only when we're sure that we have something that is ready, that is complete, committed. So we would usually set up a fork of a repo in our own organization, and that's that could be any GitHub organization that you wish, and we would also set up a platform. I'm using the word platform to indicate the actual Folio platform repository. There's, the word platform has been used in many different contexts so far, but in here I'm talking specifically about something that is called Folio Platform Complete or Platform Minimal. And so essentially a repo in Folio that indicates the list of modules that should be included in your distribution. So you would essentially customize that to your own needs, because the challenge in Folio is that it's a large system, so running it on your in your development environment is very costly. Plus, it actually probably won't fit in your in a single developer's laptop. It's just too big, so there's no way. So you want to customize that. You want to cut it down to the list of modules that you really need to work on, plus the dependencies of those modules and anything else that is required, strongly required for running an installation. And then to ensure that level of quality that I talked about, and have some independence from the Folio snapshot system, which is shared by multiple people and can sometimes be down or often be down, and that you don't want this to disturb your work. Plus, you don't actually want to disturb other developers with your changes that might be untested. You want to set up some continuous integration and deployment on your own. And we'll talk a little bit about how we're doing it. And then you need to have a process for syncing up those changes upstream, and that's very easy as long as you're keeping up with keeping within GitHub. But you can also do it outside if you want. All right, so let's just talk about how this is set up. So we have on the right, we have an upstream repo in the Folio org. So that can be anything. You know, it can be a backend module, but it can also be a front-end module. It can be a library that is in Folio. So basically anything applies here. There'll be some small differences when it comes to different kinds of modules. I'll cover the backend module case because that's the most complex, because it's usually in Folio, it requires many stages, excuse me, during the CI. So this will focus on the backend, but there I'll also talk a bit about the front end. And the front end is slightly less complicated. So you can actually use the same workflow if you want to, but you also can skip some of the steps. So given that upstream Folio repo, you would fork that into your own organization. You want to make sure that the fork is synced so that you can sync changes coming from the upstream down to your repo. And you also want to ensure that the changes can go up, can go back to the Folio organization repo. The way we do it is that we follow the guidelines that are within the repo and the forked repo. We follow the guidelines that the Folio project has recommended the developers. So basically, all the new functionality is built on feature branches within our own repo. But in addition to the standard set of branches, we have a special deployment branch. So that will be a branch that is created specifically in the repo, and that branch is never shared upstream. So that's like a throwaway branch, you could say. That is only something that you use internally in your organization to make sure that you have an integration point. You would work with that branch just like you work with the master branch in Folio. So basically, you open pull requests to that branch, and those pull requests undergo the usual set of quality gates. So there is some Sonar Cube, static checks, there are pull request reviews from developers and so forth. So just the standard bits that any committed code in Folio needs to go through. In addition to this, on that deployment branch, we set up an additional CI. So we have a CI system that builds, tests, and publishes artifacts from that local branch. In this case, we're using GitHub Actions because it's very easy to set up and it's easy for developers to change. In Folio, this is usually done with Jenkins, although there is some transition to GitHub Actions that's been done for front-end modules, but it's not full, it's not complete. So this will differ slightly from how Folio does it, but it's very simple. Yeah, and we will show you a little bit of GitHub Actions code in a moment. So that will publish artifacts, and those artifacts can be also stored in the GitHub registry. So GitHub provides an option now. It's a fairly new functionality where you can publish artifacts, and that includes Maven artifacts, so that's standard Java artifacts, but also Docker images. So those can be published and used. And those, as I mentioned, those will be very customized to your needs. They will not be shared with Folio. And then we have a deployment environment that we set up for the purpose of testing. This is done with Kubernetes. It doesn't have to be, but in our case, this is done with Kubernetes. And we have a shared cluster where we deploy a lot of different tenants and do different development work for different modules. So once those things are deployed and they can be tested, a PO working with the team. In our case, we usually have POs that have experience working with Folio, but it wouldn't have to be because it's still fairly isolated. They can review and can review the code changes on the running system. And based on that feedback, there might be some additional code changes that need to be done. Those updates would happen within the pull request that's been open to the deployment branch. So just like in FOLIO, but you have this extra time when that conversation between the PO and the developer can take place. Once you're happy with the feedback cycle and a feature is considered ready, you would reopen the same pull request to the upstream FOLIO module. So you basically take something that you feel good about. It is just that feature. It's not a whole bunch of changes that would prevent the FOLIO, the team that owns the module in FOLIO to review it, because big changes are hard to review. So it's it's a small slice, but it's a slice that is very well tested. So that's the benefit, right? So this is basically some specifics about how we approach this. So we fork the repo from the GitHub organization. We create a deployment branch. So that you can see here, the clone is essentially to get it started. And then we add an upstream that points to our own, to points at the FOLIO organization in this case. And then this is just an example URL, right? So that can be anything. In our case, that would be index data, but it can be anything else. You synchronize the upstream by fetching, and then you can create a deployment branch in here that I was talking about, and that would essentially act as your local master branch. And then if you want to get fancy about this, you can configure in GitHub to make sure that that's the default branch and put some protections on it also. But that is really up to you, and it depends what kind of development process you want to follow. If you want to follow exactly the same as FOLIO, then that's what you do. You would protect the deployment branch and make it the default. So that's regarding backend module development. So those repos, the approach that I presented here would be specific to the FOLIO modules. You need to do this, or at least some flavor of this when it comes to FOLIO backend development. For frontend, you could simplify because frontend modules usually don't require a compilation step. So you could get by creating a branch in the FOLIO upstream repo and then work on it. But I would say to simplify, it's much better if you actually fork it, because you have more flexibility this way anyway. It's not strictly required, but it's probably a better approach. The other thing that you need to do to allow product owners or some users to test it locally before the code hits FOLIO is to create a FOLIO platform. Excuse me. So you can choose platform complete or platform minimal as the starting point. If you have a fairly isolated set of modules that doesn't necessarily require all the baggage, FOLIO baggage, you're not building an extension to inventory, for example, then the best way is to start with platform minimal. That's what we do with some modules that either sit on the fringe of FOLIO ecosystem, or with things like Reacher, for example, which does not require the entire FOLIO functionality. So in that case, platform minimal is a better start because it's a really distilled set of modules. And then you would customize it for local development, remove unneeded stripes, edge, backend modules from the platform. Excuse me. Customize stripes config, set up your own Okapi 10 and then URL settings. So just to point that bundle to the local Okapi that you're running for testing. And that's an example here. So that's the platform definition with its own dependencies. You include the modules you need, plus either the forks of the FOLIO modules that you want to add, or if in case you're writing a new module, that would just point at the new module repository. And then finally, so with the platform, with repo forks for the backend and frontend modules, and with the platform that goes along with it, you need to add some CI to it. As I mentioned with GitHub Actions, it's very easy to get started with GitHub Actions. There's some examples that you can look up online. But in the simplest case, this includes 3 steps. So it includes publishing the artifacts. You need to do this for the backend modules. It's optional, as I said, for the front end. You'd have a piece of code, a couple of scripts that interface with the Kubernetes API. That's for deployment. And you would have a set of scripts, or maybe Ansible or just Python, to interface with Okapi to enable and disable modules. We have some tools that are available if you would like to use this approach, or an approach close to ours, so you can go and check them out. A library that simplifies interfacing with Okapi, a set of scripts for updating that user permissions, because that's something you would also need when you set up users for testing, and Ansible playbooks. So yeah, go and check that out. I include custom GitHub actions in the presentation. It's probably too small to go through the details here, but there's but those actions are using the scripts mentioned previously. I think we can also add a link to an existing repo that actually uses this, so you can explore if you'd like to. And of course, you can use those actions or something based on those actions for your own needs. So there will be an action for this particular action is for bundling and deploying the application. And then we also have an action that enables things in Okapi using the Okapi JS command line tool, and posts module description. So the standard stuff that happens with Folio installations, like Folio snapshot, for example. So that's not that's typical thing you would do. And yeah, and that's it. So are there any questions? Yeah, probably.
So just to clarify, you fork Folio, pretty much run everything locally in whatever way you decide, which is the way you've described. And then once you've tested it, run through various cycles, you push that back, pull request, get it approved, and off you go. It would have been really useful if I'd had that 6 months ago. Just saying.
Yeah, so not rocket science. That's probably the obvious way to do it. But what we have discovered is that we did a version of this, like over time, because we tried to stay clear of actually setting up a full-blown CI/CD on our end. But with GitHub Actions, it's really simple. So I think that barrier of doing that is actually decreased nowadays. And it's so simple that we might as well do it, and that get those additional benefits of having full flexibility.
Hi. Is this for individual developer or for a team? Like how would you define the difference?
So this can be used by a whole team. If we're talking about individual developers, there's probably a simpler version of this. So if you don't need to have a team sharing that repo, you could probably get away without having the deployment branch that I was talking about. Just have feature branches. But we essentially want to replicate the Folio development process and want to make sure that this is aligned with it, so that we don't have this extra barrier when we are then committing code upstream. So yeah, so this is meant for the team. I don't think it that much overhead, so a single developer could use it. There are some good benefits for doing that. So yeah.
Thank you. So I've long dreamed of becoming a Ronin developer, going in and finding bugs to fix and moving around. So if I was to say have a list of 3 different bugs and 3 different modules that I was going to work on, I would fork module A and then create a platform for being able to work on that and test it. Then I would push that back, then move on to module B, fork module B, create a different platform, possibly, probably, for doing that, and so on. So it'd be sort of on a per project, per bug fix, per initiative basis.
So you could do this. You could do it sort of per initiative, but that would be a lot of overhead. So we essentially do it once. You know, wherever we don't need to have development work isolated. So let's just to give you an example. Let's say we're building changes, we're adding changes to the SIP2 module, and at the same time we're extending patron notices. We wouldn't necessarily create a version of the platform for each of those small projects. We would just do it once and have the environment shared, because we don't have a huge development team, and we're just not so much concerned with those developers kind of, let's say, stepping on their toes. So I think it depends on the size of the project. You know, if it's 5 people using it, they can probably coordinate, updates to the bundle, for example. Because one thing that I didn't mention maybe specifically is that, of course, you need to rebuild the bundle. That's the Folio platform whenever there's a change to the underlying UI module. So the only issue with what you're talking about, if you have a couple of small projects, then you have to do it as often as changes in those individual projects, basically. Are there any more questions? Okay. Yeah. Should we be hearing anything online? Well, hopefully that was fixed. All right. So with that, I'm going to.
Thanks, Jakob. Thanks, Jen. All right. Let me refresh this. Okay. Okay, so my part will be a panel discussion, and it will include some folks who have recently onboarded as new Folio development teams. Also on the call, and I do have an updated slide deck that does include Lee's name. Also on Zoom is Lee Brzezinski, who will also talk as well. And he has a few slides about some tips and tricks along with regard to onboarding new development teams. So Terrence, Jacek, and Malgorzata or Gosha, can you guys just come up here? So it's so weird to have them come up here, but I mean, you're panelists, so all right. So these are a couple of the questions that each of you can answer. The Folio features you've developed, what's gone well, what have you learned, what's been challenging, and any words of wisdom for any teams that plan to onboard in the future. And I know Lee has some slides that we'll also present during this panel discussion too. So who wants to start first with these questions? Oh, wow. Gosha, do you want to start? All right.
Hello, everyone. My name is Małgorzata Gajkiewicz, and I am a part of the MOL team. We are, before we start sharing our experiences, maybe it will be best to introduce ourselves a little bit so you have a context to our experiences. So we are a company based in Poland. We deal exclusively on software for libraries market, and we've been doing that for over 30 years. 32. Yeah, so we developed a few library systems ourselves. Most of them are now known as legacy systems because they are, desktop systems. So now we are moving to the cloud, and about a year ago, we decided to become a vendor for Folio in Poland and started to look into the Folio project and, started to make some changes, adding our own app with functionality for Polish market, which are very, very specific. What else? Oh, we are a rather small company, below 20 people. So a few backend developers, a few front-end developers, and we created a small development team in FOLIO. We are now engaged in FOLIO for a few months. We actually started onboarding with the help of Kalila here. So yeah, we couldn't do it without you. Thank you. And it was a very well, challenging for us because we are rather small company without so much formality, which is well, they are very needed in a project this huge, to have all those reviews, that everything you want to add to the code must be reviewed not once but twice, but two different teams. So your codes go back and forth. Then you need to have a quality assurance engineer, which is crucial, because once you finished your work, the quality assurance engineer really starts to work very hard, and in our case it's a she, so she needs to write so many test cases, and they are also reviewed. So it's a process that we well, I was personally quite surprised. It's so formal, and you cannot do anything I mean behind someone's back. You have to follow the rules. There's no way you can add something to FOLIO without getting the approval. So it's really important to follow the rules, to create the code as expected. So there are certain rules which are important, and that was something that our developers needed to learn. And now I believe they are fluent with the process. It took some time, but well, to really to know each other with other teams that reviewed us. So now we return the favor sometime and make a review for them. So basically, my personal experience is that I thought it would be less structured, but fortunately it's very well structured, and that's why I think this FOLIO project is going forward and not falling apart. Yeah, that's maybe everything I wanted to say, so pass on. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Gosia. That was from your perspective, you're as team leader and Scrum Master in our team. Yeah, I am a product owner, so a slightly different perspective. Well, when our team started working on FOLIO, I have an idea what should be easy for us and what could be difficult. And it turned out that easy things appeared to be difficult and vice versa. So just before onboarding process, we ask our developers to make our first app in FOLIO. We tell them, make an app that tells hello world. Just show you can do it. How long would it take? They said, well, maybe a couple of months, because there are different frameworks, there is different architecture of all the systems, so we have to get used to it. We said, yeah, okay, go on. Anyway, we have to dive in this project. So they started and they delivered the first app in 2 weeks. And it didn't just say hello world. There were some backend, yes, there was some front end, some user interface. So well done. We said, now you are going to be onboarded. And I said, well, why? We know everything. Just see what we delivered. And then this process started, and then Gosia just said what happened. Yeah, well, what happened that coding making some code is one thing, but through it to pull it to Folio repositories is just another thing. So 10 times consuming, I think 10 many more work to do. That's what surprised us. It was the first thing and the second thing. And I also want to say something about my perspective as product owner. We noticed that Folio lacks of comprehensive validation of mark format. There is no comprehensive validation of mark format. We had many thoughts about it. We already did that in our legacy system, so we know how to do it. And so we thought, let's make it in Folio, just like we did it on our legacy system, with the large, comprehensive, let's say something like description of mark format, which consists of everything, structure, and also information about behavior of mark records. So every part of Folio, every part of any system which deals with mark records should look at it and see what to do. And this approach could be quite flexible because it is configured, can be configured on tenant level, so every system librarian could control that. Given, for example, new mark field, which does happen sometimes. In that approach, system librarian just can open the magic user interface and add that mark field with all the information like subfields and all what should be included, and no developer work have to be done. But soon we realized that we can apply that approach in our soft house, but not in Folio, because there are many. There's a lot of code already done, and such an approach needs many of these codes to be rewritten. So maybe it's a brilliant idea but not in existing projects. This was the hard, lesson we learned, that it's not easy to change anything, even to add anything. It's in existing project. On the other hand, it's very good news. Well, I mean, we can think of new things, isolated things, and Folio is excellent environment to do such as isolated new features, new apps. So, if I could pretend to be a coach and say any words of wisdom to any team, I don't know if any prospective team is listening to. So I could say, first of all, take a chance to be onboarded, because it's very rewarding. Thank you, Kalila. Again, thank you all the members of Spitfire team. They were very responsive, so we learned a lot. Dive into the Folio environment as deeply as you can. Do everything that you can do. Backfest, attend SIG meetings and so on, to get know how the whole system works, how the whole community works. And then when you feel you're ready, and lessons learned. Don't think of reinventing the wheel. And rather avoid, if you can avoid changing things or thinking of making this differently, it's not a good path. It doesn't mean that we cannot change. We sometimes have to change, but it's not easy. Rather focus on new things. You can develop new ideas, and when you're ready, just go on board and fly or sail, whatever you like more. So that's it in general from our perspective.
What is interesting is the different starting points. So originally, when Kalila asked me to say something, I started putting together a presentation and I had slides, and I was like, man, I'm just too tired for this crap. So I'm just going to talk. I emailed one of the developers that onboarded or try to onboard or whatever, and I got some points for him. So that's why I've got my laptop now. We'll read one or two things that he said, just a couple of sentences. But what I want to say is, for us, our project started 13 months ago, and the whole goal was go live with Folio, not Folio development. That was coming later. And because the project had gone really, really well, we were a little bit under budget, kind of rare for IT projects, right? So we were under budget by quite a lot, surprisingly. The project board said, hey, why don't you start cutting code now? And I said, look, I don't want to set up like a huge team. I don't have time for this stuff, because at the end of the day, if I'm contributing to Folio, it doesn't deliver Folio for us as an organization. So the approach was hire a dude, grab another guy that knows the library business, and Mark, and he's an AI expert, and he's like done a lot of stuff for the National Library. And I just said, dudes, there's the wiki, there's Folio, you've heard of it. The other guy had never even heard of library stuff that I hired, but he was pretty experienced. And I said, sort yourself out. Go and play, talk to the dudes on Slack. Like I was thinking like other open source projects, right? Okay. Well, obviously we were wrong, but because what we discovered, it took a long time to kind of get started. Now, the thing is, as a project manager, I was ex-developer and team leader and Scrum, all those things I've done in the past, I didn't pay attention to these guys. I said, dude, you just need to sort yourself out. I care about the other parts of our project. But every week we'd catch up and stuff like that. And I just realized how slow it took to get a line of code into the code base. Like Folio, I've aligned it. As soon as you've committed code into master, it's legacy, right? So Folio has been around for a while. It's sort of like old, it's established. There are paradigms in there. You're not going to go and reinvent the wheel because the wheel has been invented and it looks a certain way with a certain hubcap. And that's the way it is. You've got to follow the paradigm. So they had to learn all those paradigms. And they couldn't just add something. And so like when we were testing Folio with our users, we started getting a wish list of things, and let's park the wish list because wish lists are wish lists. But then they discovered a couple of things that we actually needed. So then I thought, hey, I've got EBSCO. I'll just hit EBSCO up and say, hey, EBSCO, knock out a couple of these mini things. And they're very small. They weren't huge features. And I realized no capacity. They're doing stuff. Kalila's shaking her head. And so then I said to the guys, I said, look, let's go look at our list and let's pick the most simplest thing on our list that we want done, which is not a huge app. It's nothing ambitious. It's literally, and I've got it over here in our wish list. And I was going to call no, not a wish list. It's this. Okay, I don't think we've done that one yet, but I'll mention it. The ability to print an individual call slip. And it's quite simple. I mean, think about it. You go to the request app and you go print. But that doesn't exist. There's a button somewhere on the right-hand side and you go there and it's a service point and you click all and it's anyway, it's weird. But anyway, beside the point, I wanted that. And then we realized, wait a minute, the pick slips don't have all the information on it. So we need a few more things. There's a system, you can customize it. And we discovered it's called a token. So we need like 3 more tokens. So my business area said, we don't want those pick slips. We need patron group on there. It was a good example. Just patron group, quite an obvious little thing. You know, I can even picture the UI, you could drag and drop and it's like, realistically, it should be in other systems. We've got it's like a 10-minute job. So anyway, I got this guy called Ravi. I said, Ravi, do the pick slip token thing. And I think he took 3 months to get that thing into the code base. And now it's because I didn't pay any attention to him and he didn't know anything about the community. We live on the other side of the world. We're out of every time zone for most things. So anything's recorded, right? So that now people are very friendly on Slack and everything, and that's, you know, the community is good. I'm not saying the community is bad, but and I just flicked them at the documentation. There's like some onboarding documentation there that somebody's written and updated at various times. But if Jakub had been around and you'd had that presentation, we would have had a starting point and an approach. So what did we do? We decided to run the entire folio. So I've got 2 guys working on AWS for like 3 weeks, spinning up with 60 containers, and they're going, dude, this is like way complicated just to run the product. And then we suddenly went, how do I run it on my local machine? Because most apps we've ever developed, you can at least run majority of it on your local machine. Oh, I don't have enough RAM. So then I got a custom built machine and I spoke to, because I actually run the IT section. I said, dude, just order some RAM, knock together a machine for this guy. That took like 3 weeks to arrive because it had to be special set of RAM from HP. It was a complete pain. Anyway, give him the machine. Dude, just sort yourself out. I'm concentrating on the project over here, doing other stuff. And then he spins wheels, catching up, and it just took so slow. And then suddenly, I finally got the code in. Oh, that's right. And then we just suddenly discovered there's this thing called a Rancher environment. We get access to that. And so, okay, so how do we get this set up? Oh, no, talk to so-and-so, so-and-so. And it's like, who? And then on Slack, you're hitting up 10 people. Eventually find the right people. You ask them, and they were very responsive. They set up Rancher. And then he figured out, but how do I can't step trace the back-end code. I've got to do a 7-minute turnaround to check out the code, make a line change, push it back into a Git repository, then go to Rancher, click a few buttons. It does a whole whatever it does, and then it deploys, and he goes, oh, okay, I can see my hello world. Okay, cool. That took 7 minutes. Now, the thing is, I'm not saying that's the way you should have done it, but this is the problem that we were going through. It was like, we have certain paradigms in various contexts you find yourself. I didn't have a big team to set up, and we had 0 context of starting. And I think having a pattern like what you've got over there, I think having a pattern for a single developer in a small institution who wants to fix a couple bugs, have a couple things, and I think having somebody where they can talk to then work you through will speed up completely. Because I think of teams that I've set up on existing projects where I've hired, say, a new contractor or a new person. They come up, they wingman with somebody. They sit beside you or contact, and within 3 weeks, they're cutting code, right? Maybe not the most complex thing in the universe, but they're cutting the most lower end things. And by the way, adding an extra token to the pick slip, to me, would seem like, apart from a spelling mistake on a UI, would be one of the most easiest things to actually do. And then eventually we got to the end. Ravi got the code in. He discovered he needed 2 extra people to approve the code. We didn't have enough people on our team. So then he hit up other people and they go, who are you? Like, oh, no, I need you to approve my code. But what's the context? And so I was like, there's the whole universe over there. Then eventually I thought, we've arrived. We're going to get the token in. And then, oh, have you set up a test Rails account? Well, what? So anyway, Lee got on board, who's on the call. He's probably laughing right now. He eventually helped us. And then I decided we have to set up all these test rail things. So I got what we call a business analyst, which is probably the product owner. So I got a guy called Brad from my other team. He said, dude, you need to write this test case for Ravi because he doesn't have time to do this stuff. He got test rails, but he can't run anything because the access he only got was to create one, but he can't click a button to say run. That took another 2 weeks to get. So, it's sounding like a bureaucratic, big government project, right? And I think to a certain extent it is like that, and it's funny, but at the same time, I think if we change a couple small things, it'll speed everybody up and you'll be able to get smaller institutions that have like 1 or 2 devs some time, maybe draw in like this guy that I've got who's the AI expert. He's been developed for like 40 years. He's very experienced. He loves libraries, loves them. But I asked him, I said, dude, on your weekends, would you bother committing code to this? And he said, not on your life. It's just way too complex. And it's because the process is too hard. Now, I'm not saying go and change product councils and make all those. I'm not saying any of that stuff. I'm just saying on the tech, if we come up and make it really simple, I think we'll be able to get faster throughput of stuff. And we follow the processes and et cetera. And I think having a little talk like that and a few others put together, I think there's an idea of a developer advocate or something. I think it's a great idea. Like, because I mean, if you, anyway, I'll mention a couple. So I asked Ravi, I said, Ravi, Kalila's given us 4 questions or 5 questions. What has gone well? So I'm going to read exactly what he said. They are single sentence answers. They're not long. He's a developer. Obviously they don't like to talk much, which is obvious, right? Because most of us are on the spectrum. So it's okay. So what has gone well? Collaboration with the Laris and Vega team went well. So tick to those teams and collaborated really well. The Laris team helped me with the Rancher environment, and I remember that specifically. And I was able to successfully complete the full life cycle of code change for the release. Members of Vega helped me with code reviews and also the local folio setup. However, what he's not saying in that is that the different teams develop differently. So it took us a while to figure out, I think it was the Vega team, that was the team, was it Polaris or Vega? The one team that we were assigned to originally, the team based in India, right? When you asked them, how do I step trace the back-end code? They said, oh, we don't, if you need to. That's not the way we operate. But it turns out you can. But it just wasn't, he had to talk to the right person. Well, it took him 4 months to find the right person to actually talk to. Problem. But he didn't say that. He's been kind. What have you learned? So he said, I've learned the setup and configuration of the local development environment using VirtualBox and Vagrant. In addition to that, I learned Rancher environment setup, which helped during the implementation of features. Oh, by the way, that AWS thing we set up, which cost quite a bit of money to get it all up and running, we eventually threw away once we discovered we had Rancher. So again, telling teams that you actually got an environment, you don't need to build it yourself, does save time. I've now become familiar with the back end and all the different modules. What has been challenging? Setting up a local development environment. See, it's a bit of a theme here, is a bit challenging. I think that's an understatement. Most of the documentation written over the wiki is based on the assumption that developers are using Linux for local development. So for Windows environment setup was a little bit hard. Can't comment on that. I run a Mac. I hate Windows anyway. I think it's shit. But anyway, he likes Windows. I don't know if that's true. You guys have been around will know whether that's true or not. Any words of wisdom? The documentation works in theory. I love that. Don't you love that? That's like the standard thing. Documentation works in theory. It's like comments in code. But it's hard to keep it up to date. There's always something that's obsolete and causes pain. That's the word you're looking for. I know you wanted to say it, but you didn't say it. But I know it is pain. I could see it on your face. It causes pain in the initial setup. I feel the best way to help a new team is to pair them with somebody who's gone through the onboarding recently. And this way, the team can follow the Docker as well as have someone to reach out in case they are stuck. So I think small practical changes with a couple patterns like that will get people. I think it would have saved my little team months. And I love the way you described your thing, because it actually turns out you can then follow your local process. I know you're choosing to adopt the Folio way, but it enables teams to sort of get up to speed. My intention is that now that we've gone live, I've got 2 dev teams, and one of them are kind of ramping down because we've changed all the internal apps to integrate with Folio. And as we're finishing decommissioning, because we're actually going to decommission stuff, surprisingly, most projects just leave the old apps running. We're actually going to decommission stuff, and then they're going to have time. And then Ravi is going to sit with my actual team live face to face. And then what he took 3 months should take a day or 2 hours to pass on. And I think that's the way we're going to do that. But I think your starting point is important, and your starting point when people don't know anything about Folio, like zero. Like there might be very experienced developers. You might have the entire dev stack of the things that they know, but the way you are doing it is very different to what they've come from. And if they don't even know who to talk to and how to approach that, it's very challenging to kind of get across. I mean, Ravi was actually, he's a nice guy. And about 2 months in, we're having this meeting, and I think he thought I was going to fire him because he hadn't actually done anything. And I said to him, dude, your role, which is actually really easy, think of this as a really easy contract. You're running ahead, you're learning the ropes that'll pass on to the other people. And I'm not expecting huge productivity from you now. But I really felt for the guy, except he was working from home and he's dropping his kid at school. I said, just see it as a half holiday. If it takes 24 to 48 hours to get an answer to a question, that's the price of living in Australia, right? So anyway, that's our pain. I've now shared it with you. I feel better. I've got it off my chest. I think we should head over to Lee now.
Before Lee starts, thanks Gosha, Jacek, and Terrence. The experiences were different, with Gosha and Jacek. They were completely embedded with another development team for a month and a half, maybe 6 weeks. And we still continue to engage with the MOL team. So every 2 weeks, we meet and talk about stories and features as POs. And Violetta, their amazing QA person, meets with my QA team once a week, and we then meet as a group and talk through any issues as well. So that's one experience, and then obviously you heard Terrence's experience. But this is why Lee is important to this next part, because based on some of Terrence's experiences, we began to develop. Oh, thanks, guys. Thanks for making the initiative, Terrence, to get away. Yeah, but based on some of Terrence's tales of woe, we have begun to develop some documentation, at least for teams we work with, as far as onboarding goes. And so, Lee, do you want me to go to the next slide and take it away?
Please, yes. And can you guys see me? Can you see me wave?
1 second. Let me see if I can. I don't know how to do this here. I'm sorry, I can't do that, Lee, because it's a PowerPoint show.
Oh, so you can't even see me. All right, okay. Fine. Can you hear me?
Oh, yes.
Loud and clear?
Indeed.
Excellent. Okay. Terrence, I'm sorry your experience has been pretty tough, but let me say one thing. It's learning is a two-way street, right? So you should have probably told me that you were having a lot of difficulties, right? And we would have arranged for assistance, right? So, but going forward, and my slides will cover what the new team needs to know, right? Go ahead.
Yeah, that's true, and yeah, these are slides for moving forward.
Moving forward, yes. So lessons learned. I would say Khalila's experience with Team MOL, right, is more efficient than our experience with the NLA team, right? Which is unfortunate. Team NLA has great guys, right? And hopefully now, Terrence, are they up to speed now? Ravi and Kent?
We believe they are.
Okay. Okay. So another lesson learned, guys, do not be shy. All right. Now I'm addressing the hypothetical new team. All right. The new team lead and the new team product owner, new team scrum master. Please do not be shy. Right. We will always be happy to answer your questions, to arrange hands-on sessions, Q&A sessions, walkthrough sessions, if you guys request them, or even if you say I'm having difficulties with XYZ, let's analyze them together, right? And let's come up with the recipe how to overcome your hurdles. All right. So can I see my slides, please? Or should I be sharing?
You should be seeing the slides. You don't see them, Lee?
No, ma'am. I'm seeing WOLFcon 2023 schedule. Oh, I can see me now. That's cool.
All right, Lee, hang on for a minute. Yeah, you caught me off guard with that one. Can you see the slide?
Yes,
Okay.
yes.
Okay.
Thank you. So as Jakob said, right, we like new teams, right? We welcome new teams to the Folio community. And to me, the word community signifies that we're all in the same boat, right? And we must help each other, right? So what happens before the onboarding starts, right? I capitalized host team and new team, right? So first of all, we need to identify the host team, right? The host team is the team, the existing Folio team that will be assisting the new team with onboarding, right? With the case, and as an example, Team Spitfire was the host team for Mole, and first Volaris and then Vega were host teams for Team NLA, right? So how do we pick the host teams? Well, first of all, the host team must be familiar with the area that the new team will be working, right? Otherwise, it doesn't make any sense. Obviously, the host team must have enough bandwidth to spend some time, some cycles with the new team. One other thing I wanted to say is, speaking of lessons learned, I was, as I was listening to Terence's presentation, obviously Team Volaris budgeted some time in the beginning of the onboarding process, right, to spend with the NLA guys. And then they simply said, well, we're out of time, we can help. So the budgeting should be done not like top heavy, so to speak, right? We should budget, the host team should budget enough time in the like a month down the road or 2 months down the road, and the new team is more or less up to speed but has issues or questions, right? So that's one thing that I just thought of. Right. The important part about the new team, right? The new team must have developers, Scrum Master, and product owner, right? We prefer to have testers, QA engineers on the team, but as I stated here on the slide, it's not uncommon in the Folio world that the entire team is responsible for the team work product's quality, right? Again, as practice shows, it's beneficial to have a dedicated QA engineer with the QA mindset, right? Which is a very different mindset than that of a software engineer who writes code. Next slide, please. Thank you. So tools and systems, all right? It's simply a reminder. I'm not, in these slides, I'm not telling how to do that, but it's simply a reminder what tools you need to gain access to, right? And where you need to create accounts. GitHub, Jira, TestRail. Guys, do not ignore TestRail, right? Slack and Folio Confluence, right? Move on, please. Obviously, the new team should familiarize itself with the Folio technical aspect, right? I call it Folio architecture and code base, right? As necessary, including Okapi, which is the backend heart of Folio, and our front-end framework gold stripes. All right, typical activities here, but obviously not limited to these activities. It's a presentation style. It's a code walkthrough. Peer programming. I love peer programming. I think peer programming is the best exercise, but in order to go into peer programming exercise, the new team member needs to be more or less up to speed. Right, so it cannot be like you can't educate a total novice doing peer programming. It should be, you should have enough experience to appreciate what the other person is doing, right? Writing code for you or with you, right? And obviously the fourth one would be whatever Q&A conversations, right? Have conversations, have Q&A sessions. Ask questions, come up with questions, concerns, suggestions. Why not, right? All right, next slide, please. Local development setup. Well, Jakob talked about this in detail. I'll just say that each developer on the new team must have a development tool, right? Say IntelliJ, VS Code, or the tool of choice. It needs to be able to check out the code for the module the person will be working on, right? To carefully read the README for that module, and finally create the local build as appropriate. So at this point, after you complete your point 4, you should be able to develop at least locally. Right, move forward, please. Now you have a team, and each developer has a local environment set up, but how do they push their code into something where their product owner can look at it and their tester can test? Well, for that, each team has an integration environment, right? Integration environments are based on the Rancher tool. And each integration environment has a continuous integration, continuous deployment pipeline. Typically, this is done by our DevOps team called Team KitFox. So don't hesitate to reach out to them and request a new environment to be set up with a new CI/CD pipeline. Please proceed. And this slide covers the skills that you need to obtain, right? Let's go over them relatively slowly. Become familiar with the definition of done. What is the definition of done? It's a document which describes what should happen with the story and the story code, story implementation to consider it done. All right. Feel free, and it covers the development portion, testing, non-functional requirements, and release. Right. So don't hesitate to discuss in the new team the definition of done, right? And make sure every point is understood, right? Don't hesitate to schedule a meeting with the host team and ask them questions. What do these criteria mean to you guys? So that's the definition of done. The next several bullet points are the skills that you need to obtain. We use integration tests with the Karate framework. That's the backend integration. And by the way, Karate tests are part of the definition of done. All right. The front-end testing, end-to-end, we refer to them as E2E tests using Cypress. These are automated tests, all right, from the user standpoint. If Karate are integration tests, right, pretty much you chain several API calls together, and in the end, you are testing for the result, right? Obviously, each test must have an assert, right? Must test for the result of the sequence. All right. So learn Karate, learn Cypress, become familiar with the process of raising, approving, and merging PRs, right? We typically require 2 engineers to approve, right? So it's not a rocket science, but make sure that the team is comfortable, all right, raising and approving and merging their PRs. That the team members know how to add comments to the PRs and so forth, how to address them, and so forth, right? Become familiar with the process of releasing modules, right? Obviously, you will not be working on all modules in Folio, but some of them, right? So make sure you understand how to release modules. The next thing is, to me, it's the most interesting one, right? How do you ensure that your work product is of high quality? You can poke around here and there, do some willy-nilly testing, but the important part is to approach your testing systematically, even if you don't have a QA engineer in your team, right? If there is no QA engineer, then the product owner and the developers must sit down and think about the test scenarios, test cases, right? The positive cases, the negative cases, the edge cases, right? And these cases need to be documented in TestRail, right? And feel free to ask the host team to review your test cases, or even more interesting, participate in determining the test scenarios, right? By the way, I'm always available to participate in such activities, and so is my colleague Yogesh Kumar, who is our QA lead. We'll be delighted to participate in those. Become familiar with Bugfest practice, right? At the end of each Flower release, we have Bugfest, right? Bugfest is when we all execute test cases, the created test cases from TestRail, right? We have a rule in Folio. You developed it, you support it going forward, right? We don't have a sustaining team, right? It's your responsibility to address found issues. So be prepared during the Bugfest to execute your test cases or test cases in your area, right? Not necessarily just your cases, but the cases in your functional area. Or if you're doing some technical refactoring, then your responsibility may span more areas, right? And be prepared to quickly address found bugs there, right, in Bugfest. Also become familiar with creating release notes for your functionality. Next, please, if there is anything else.
The only the final slide, Lee, is one that I think I created here, and this is all coming from Lee. So he's given all these wonderful recommendations, kind of aligned with what Terrence said. Provide this documentation, make it available so that you're not sifting through 100 different wiki pages or trying to contact 500 people to get answers to your questions. So the PowerPoint slide deck is a great start, as well as what Jakob provided too. And here's some other suggestions, Lee, that you had. Create a Slack channel where you can engage with that host team, schedule recurring check-ins, and just as a host team, also make sure you're providing support. And what Lee presented today comes from a checklist that's here that we actually did show Terrence at some point. It's the same one. Don't know how much it was updated since our last conversation, but a lot of it comes from that checklist, and it's because we heard Terrence's team's pain when they were asking for PR reviews, and realized that something needed to be done to provide some guidelines or some understanding, not just for the new teams, but also the host teams as to what their commitments are. So that, I think that's it, Lee. I think
any questions, comments?
Yeah.
Suggestions?
Okay, well, let's start with the developer advocate for here.
Well, I was going to speak for myself, not so much as one of the people pushing the dev advocate thing, although I mean, thank you to all the presenters. That was fantastic as someone who's just been doing Folio for a short period of time, about a year. I love some of the points that everybody made, and Terrence made a really good point about learning that different teams do things differently in certain ways, right? One thing I've learned is that's absolutely the case. I think the models that Jakob provided of setting up a development environment is a great model of doing that. And the model that Lee just described of what a development team should be doing is probably the best model of doing that as well. One thing I've learned is every team does things differently, and especially, some of the things that I know are requirements for EBSCO teams are not done by index data teams, and vice versa. Some of the things done by development teams that are not owning modules, but are contributing to modules, or individual developers. Again, they're slightly different requirements. So again, I think those are the fantastic models of how we should all probably be looking at things. But the wonderful thing about our project is we have a relatively small number of actual requirements and a lot of commonalities and conventions of how we get things done. And talking in the community and sharing resources like all of these is a great way to get different opinions on, for example, how to set up a new development environment. There's 10 answers to that, and maybe half of them are good. And everybody's experience is unique, but getting different perspectives on all these things, you come up with what answer works individually. For example, I do run Folio on my laptop, the full Folio release. It's a beast of a laptop, thanks to Boaz for getting me 64 gigs of RAM. Otherwise, that wouldn't have been possible. But all these things are, can be different depending on your situation. Thank you so much for that presentation.
Thank you, Mankabi. Happy. So yeah, a little bit kind of following this, just to kind of on the Lehigh side, I guess. So understanding what is relevant for the product manager. So I'm assuming the business dependencies on all the stuff that we just saw are quite high. And, like I'm thinking about Terrence and, Yashik and Mila, and kind of thinking, well, customers are waiting. We need to kind of make sure that the stuff is happening. We want to make sure, all of it works. So out of respect to, your end of things, as well as the development itself, it sounds like we need a little bit more support on that end, on the business side as well, just to say, like when you're thinking about expectations around the beast, what are the kind of things you need to take into account when you're talking with your customers, etc. And what worries me, so this is like, if it is 4 months, if it takes that long, if it is, like something, I would try and figure out a better lightweight approach. I think, Terence, you said 2 things that can be dropped. I forgot, what were they? But it's gonna be good to kind of get into like the things that can expedite, if at all, and if not, then set those expectations from the beginning for any business type of needs that may occur. So that's all I want to say. Thank you.
Mark?
Just a quick comment. Mark Alcott from EBSCO. Just a quick comment, which is that I can remember one of our partners had put their best developer on Folio. It took him 6 months to get up to speed with it and 6 months to deliver something in it. And then when he eventually did deliver something, he left. So I'm very pleased to see this, because I'm very much hopeful that much faster contribution from a much broader, more diverse range of contributors will be a huge step forwards to Folio and put us back where we could have hoped we would be in the first place. That's just a comment from me.
Jeremy, the new PO.
Can a development team or that only has 2 people contribute to the project, given that it said that there was a requirement for a PO and a Scrum Master, which doesn't leave you a lot of development at that point? I guess that's my question.
Do you want to answer it, really, or Mike? Okay, so Mike wants to answer your question.
We have a couple of projects that we're working on where we have 2 developers working on them.
Scrum Master, I'm going to try to move into the PO realm, and I've also done software development. I mean, it seems like in reality you can wear lots of hats, at least potentially. Is that just like a
Well, no. Well, I think no. I think what Lee had there was, this would be an ideal team where you have your PO, you have a tester, which would be great. You have a Scrum Master and developers, but not all teams are going to have that. I mean, two developers handle tokens. Yeah. And they did the tests, and they learned test rails and karate. Oh yeah, Brad was added for that, but karate tests and all of that. So that's the ideal team, but we all know that that's not always the case.
Correct. Mm-hmm.
Sorry, Lee, you scared us.
Sorry, I scared you.
I think from our experience, look, I'm not upset about our experience, so don't get me wrong. I knew it would be painful, right? Because I remember 3 years ago sitting and hearing the way Folio is put together, and I realized it's not like an Apache project with a whole bunch of people who've committed stuff, and you just go to GitHub, check out an issue and go, oh, here's my code, right? So I knew it would be more complex, but I think the challenge that we had is that I think you can take kind of what Lee's put up and you can condense it. I think if you take Jakob's pattern about how to do it, how to achieve it, you can reduce that to even just a single developer working in a small organization, because it's a starting point. I think the next step is the actual, how do I set up my local environment? Because most devs are pretty good, the ones I've worked with, and taking your point of an experienced developer, it shouldn't take you that long to come up to speed to stuff, right? So if you know what the pattern is to set it up, and this is the way you do it, you can use whatever IDE you've got, and whatever it is, they'll quickly get past that, and then the lowest hanging defect / code change, which is minor, they can start poking around and then start making changes. I think that can be reduced and condensed and put into something very digestible. And that I'm not talking like a person who's been cutting code for 2 or 3 years, maybe 2 years is a bit little, but somebody closer to 3-4 year mark who's done a few things, totally familiar in GitHub, talking about the GitHub actions and different kinds of stuff, totally familiar on the various technology stacks, very, across the whole stack, then I think within weeks they should be able to get going. And I think that should be the goal. And having something like that, because then you will get more people involved and have smaller teams. You don't want to necessarily own an app, own a huge module. I want to write a new thing called Tasks plus that does some crazy stuff and pulls in stuff from Monday.com. I mean, that's like pie in the sky, right? They might just want a simple thing. I want the list in some search. Like, I'll give you an example. I got a minor feature. All I really want is to go to the users app and search by date, create date. Why isn't that there? Prime example. Shouldn't be that hard. A couple of days worth of work can't be hard to specify. There's a prime example of things I think we could easily have. And that would add a lot of benefit of the small things and leave the established teams or kind of big picture stuff. Let them keep on doing this stuff. Like the stuff we heard of the re-architecture. I mean, that is huge amounts of work. Leave that to the people who are really committed into that space. And then the small things can be really picked up by the smaller teams, I think.
This is something that I've been kicking around, and this is like the perfect room to ask this question. But I'll make it quick. We want at TAMU to launch our own team, and we plan on focusing on workflows for development, and there's a lot of community interest in workflows. So one of the things that we were hoping to do is put public sprints on the schedule, put them on the calendar, and then for individual developers that are out there that are looking, we have a lot of experience developing on Folio, historically. So we figured we could do the heavy lifting of sorting all this stuff out, and then just act as a place if someone has interest in developing on workflows. It could be an easy place to plug in for a series of sprints. Now, that's a little different model than at least I've seen in Folio historically. So I just want to ask, is that a good idea in y'all's opinion? Or are we going to really mess things up by trying that? We have been approached by individuals in the past who are like three, yeah, but I'll take them. Yeah. And it's not just total independence. These are folks who are like at organizations, but they have like one development resource, and their organization is not necessarily interested in them spinning up a whole team, but they're looking for some place to plug in, maybe.
I know that Michigan State provided Damien for Dennis and the Thunderjets, so it worked really well, and it also helped them. Because acquisitions. So having someone with that domain knowledge really helped, I think, with their migration. So it can work. It's just you have to make sure you have that commitment that they're not just going to be there one sprint and then go off the next sprint. It needs to be, you need a couple of sprints. It's worth your while and worth their while. Yeah, it'd be ridiculous. Yeah. All right. We're over time for a 90-minute session. So this means it was, I think, pretty good. Thank you, Jakob, Terrence, Mr. Jacek, Gosha, and thanks for all the questions. And have a great rest of your conference.